Hey, what's up, everybody? What's up, YouTube? Great to be back with you today. We're streaming on Podbean as well. What's up, Podbean? Hello to everybody over there, and great to see all of you as well. It doesn't look like we have anybody with us yet, but we're going to get rolling, and I'm sure everyone will jump in shortly. So just take a moment, get myself ready since I'm not being observed. All right, and we can organize the video. Great. On air. Perfect. All right. So, hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Love Show. Shane Kohler here with you today. Pleasure to be on with you and looking forward to diving into today's discussion. Today's going to be a good one. And if you were with me last week, then last week I did a really cool discussion around attraction and the science and the hormones behind attraction and really how we are, what happens for us in terms of hormones and scientifically as we're involved with someone and getting to know them and becoming attracted to them. And in today's episode, I'm going to continue the conversation, but honing in specifically on the differences between men and women. And so as I've been continuing kind of my research and, been kind of gripped by this conversation of attraction and the science behind it and how it all works. And as I've been continuing my research, I found some really fascinating things. Continuing off of last week, we talked about dopamine, we talked about norepinephrine, we talked about serotonin, we talked about oxytocin, testosterone, estrogen, all these different hormones that are kind of active in the dating and attraction phases as we're getting to know someone. And then there's another one that we're going to talk about today that I didn't touch on last week that is particularly present for men. And that's called vasopressin. So we're going to talk about the role of vasopressin in long-term commitment and how that develops for men over time. So a lot of cool stuff I want to talk about today. But I think to really start today's conversation, I just want to begin by presenting the idea that men and women bond very differently. And I think a lot of the, most of the challenges, like when I get questions or, people come to me for coaching, like so much of the challenges that people are facing when it comes to love or dating or romance or getting into a relationship or any and all of it, so much of the challenges that we're facing is around the fact that we bond differently. And naturally, and I mean, we all do this in every aspect of our lives, right? We wrongfully assume that people are going to respond to things or handle things or think about things or feel about things the way we do. And we do this all the time, everywhere. Everybody does it. But particularly when it comes to dating and romance, I think women expect men to bond to them the way that they bond to men. And I think men expect women to bond to them the way they bond to women. And of course, I'm talking about kind of a heteronormative situation here. And I think these, as with everything, these principles apply. But when you get into gay relationships or different kinds of relationships, I think the principles are there, but they're a little bit different because the dynamics are a little bit different. So I'm going to kind of keep it in heteronormative terms so we can understand the concepts as simply as possible. And so there's a certain process that women go through when they bond to a man. And there's a certain process that men go through when they bond to a woman. And these processes are different, right? They're very distinct. And what was I going to say? Last week, I talked about kind of the general process that we all go through when, we're dating. This week, we're going into more of the specifics of, okay, what is a woman's process and what is a man's process? And I do also want to say, as into this conversation, that there are women out there who bond more closely to the way men bond. And there are men out there who bond more closely to the way women bond. But we're gonna be, again, talking about generalities and kind of norms so we can understand the concepts. And then, of course, there are going to be fluctuations in all directions. So Generally speaking, unfortunately for women, I'll say women tend to bond faster than men do. Women tend to bond faster than men do. And this is the result of one particular neurochemical called oxytocin, which we talked about last week. So, oxytocin is the bonding chemical. It's the chemical that is released during childbirth, it's released during breastfeeding, it's released during sex, it's released during dating. When you're getting to know someone and you're falling in love with them, oxytocin is generally the reason for that, right? Oxytocin is generally the thing that has you really bond to someone in a way where you say, oh my God, I want to be with them forever. Dopamine is more of the rush, the excitement of, oh, I really like this person. I can't wait to see them again. But oxytocin is the thing that makes you feel like you want to be with them forever. Now, women release oxytocin very naturally. It's again, it happens during childbirth, it happens during breastfeeding, it happens during sex, particularly for women. It can happen during sex for men as well, but often not in the same way or in the same amounts or as quickly or as frequently. So the reason for that is that testosterone, high levels of testosterone actually block the production of oxytocin. So the very thing that is produced in women that has them bond to a man and want to get very close to a man and want to develop a strong relationship with a man, the very thing that has her do that is blocked by the male sex hormone. Now, he can release oxytocin long term, and he will, and he does, right? But in the short term, especially when his testosterone is very high, he's not going to release large amounts of oxytocin. He's going to release smaller amounts of it, or sometimes maybe not at all, or the majority of it will be blocked. Now, if you understand the evolutionary substance behind this, is like you've got to look at, if you imagine being a cave woman, and I mean, honestly, even in today's society, like there are places where like you still can't call the police and they can't come protect you, right? So like, yes, in many places in our world, we're pretty safe today. And in other places, we're still not. But if you imagine being a cave woman, right, and you're very vulnerable, like, I mean, just strictly on a physical level, women are vulnerable to men. In an altercation between a woman and a man, 9 times out of 10, the man is going to overpower the woman. And so when you're a cave woman and you're vulnerable, like your only real choice, your only real option for safety is to bond with a man to protect you from other men. And so, evolutionarily speaking, women have developed the ability to bond to men very quickly. That's what keeps them safe. That's what allows them to be protected in the world. Not only that, but women are not only concerned about their own protection, they're also attuned to the protection of themselves and the protection of their child, right? So women not only need to bond to men for their own protection, but they also need to bond to men to protect themselves and their child. So evolutionarily speaking, it's built into the system that when a woman is in close relationship with a man, hormones are released that cause her to bond, especially during sex, especially during close intimacy, especially as the relationship develops, especially as you spend more time together. Now, if the woman didn't do this, right? And please understand, I'm not talking about modern people. I'm not talking about the way it is in our society. I'm talking about evolutionarily what's happening for us so you can understand why we are the way we are, why we experience the things we experience. Evolutionarily speaking, if a woman did not quickly bond to a man, our species would have died out, right? Because the women needed to be kept safe in order for them to give birth to children, in order for children to, right, in order for them to grow and our species to continue. And the same thing is true if a woman was not attuned to protecting her child and bonding with a man in order to protect her child, our species would also die out, right? So like there's this, it's built into the system that women need to bond to men for protection and to protect their child. And that's what allows our species to survive. Men, on the other hand, don't need that bond for protection, right? So men, evolutionarily speaking, are more programmed to spread their seed. That's what that's what evolutionarily would keep our species alive, right? Men bonding with women and having one family with one child with one group, right? Right? Like that's actually going to limit the survival of the species. Now, as I say this, I'm not suggesting that men should be out there sleeping around with everybody. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just talking about the evolutionary aspects that are causing us to experience what we experience now. Right? So it's better for the survival of our species if the men stay out there spreading their seed around and the women attach to men to protect themselves and their children, right? That's what perpetuates the survival of the species. In our modern world, we have concerns that are bigger than survival. Okay. In a lot of modern societies, women don't need to bond to men for survival now, right? In general, I understand there are exceptions to this, especially in certain places in the world. But in general, in a lot of places, women are relatively safe, right? So that need to bond is not there in the same way. But the evolutionary mechanics are still there. Same thing, we don't necessarily need men to be out there spreading their seed all over the place. You know, the world is overpopulated, right? Like we don't necessarily need that in the same way. But evolutionarily speaking, the mechanics are still in place. So the reason I'm kind of breaking this down is because you want to understand when a man and a woman meet, this is what is at play, right? These are the dynamics that are at play. This is what's happening. The woman is looking to bond. The man is looking to spread a seed and move on. Now, of course, it's not only hormones. It's not only evolution. It's not like there's a lot of other factors involved here too, right? We have cultural upbringing. We have the fact that maybe that man is more of a romantic. We have the idea that maybe he grew up with loving parents and he always admired the way his father loved his mother and he always wanted to do that for a woman, right? There maybe like there are different possibilities. So I'm not saying that all men are wired to be this way and across the board and that's just how it is. There are all different kinds of men that are all in all different places in their lives. But you want to understand that biologically speaking, this is to a large degree what's happening for a man. And so there's something called the Coolidge effect. And the Coolidge effect is something that's been observed in animals. And for most mammals, this is the observed behavior, is that when a male animal sleeps with the same female more than a few times, they start to lose interest and they start to look for other females. And this is again an effect that's been observed in animals. It's due to high levels of testosterone, right? So high levels of testosterone create this need to kind of keep moving on, keep moving forward, keep looking for the next conquest, so to speak, right? That's what high levels of testosterone create. When a man is in a relationship with a woman for an extended period of time, his testosterone starts to lower. And as his testosterone starts to lower, what starts to become available is one, oxytocin. And that's probably the biggest thing that becomes available is oxytocin because as I said earlier, high levels of testosterone block the production of oxytocin. So when a man is operating with high levels of testosterone, he has the inability to bond. He cannot deeply make a bond when he is operating with very high levels of testosterone. The longer, as I was saying, the longer he's in a relationship with a woman, the lower his testosterone becomes. Now, in the early, say the attraction phase, if you remember, if anybody was with me last week, and if you haven't listened to last week's episode, I would say it's one you definitely want to check out because in that episode, I'm kind of laying the foundations for a lot of the things we're talking about in this episode in terms of all the different hormones that are active and the different stages of attraction and things like that. In the attraction phase, which we talked about last week on the podcast, the active hormones are dopamine, something called norepinephrine, and then there's a reduction in serotonin. For men in particular, the experience of dopamine is critical to how they fall in love. I said earlier there's another hormone we're going to touch on today called vasopressin. That's also critical for how a man falls in love. And so there's this period of time when a man meets you, and it's just been recorded across the board. Studies have shown that single men and men who are dating have much higher levels of testosterone than men who are married or in committed relationships. So when a single man is dating and he meets a woman, you can generally assume, I mean, of course, there are variations. Of course, everybody's a little different, but you can generally assume he's got high levels of testosterone in his system, which means he has a high sex drive. So when you meet a man, I'm speaking to all the ladies out there, when you meet a man and unless, he's been very sexually active in the recent days before he's been with you, right? Like there's a good chance that this man has a high sex drive. And if he's dating you and if he's not sleeping with other people, that sex drive is being directed at you, right? Like he's putting that energy towards you. Now, if that energy gets satisfied too quickly, and as I say this, like I know I often talk about like women, it is generally good advice to not sleep with a man right away. And when I say that, I'm not trying to police anybody's sexuality. I'm not trying to, disempower anybody or anything like that. But like, this is something I've just observed coaching men, coaching women, like over the years. I've observed that when men have sex very quickly, they often also lose interest very quickly. And the science that I've been studying recently is actually backing all this up. So again, it's not to disempower anybody. It's not to restrict you. It's not to say what you can and can't do. If you want to just go have sex just for the fun of it without any expectation that it's going to lead anywhere, then by all means, I wouldn't tell you not to. But if you're seeking a long-term relationship, it is generally advisable to not sleep with someone right away. Because the reason is when a man is operating at high levels of testosterone, as I've already said, oxytocin is not being produced, which means that he's not bonding closely. The next thing that's going to happen is even though he's not producing oxytocin, he is producing dopamine. Dopamine is the reward hormone. So every time he sees you, every time he touches you, every time he kisses you, every time he gets close to you, every time he thinks about you, the dopamine is being released in his system, which is his reward motivation, right? So it's telling him this is good. You want to see her. You want to talk to her. You want to call her. You want to think about her, right? The dopamine is calling him towards you. He's also developing, maybe not as quickly as the dopamine is being produced, but there's another hormone being produced called vasopressin. And that's like a protective hormone. That's like when it shows up in women, it's like mama bear energy. Like think about like mama bear, don't touch my cub. Like that's vasopressin in women. Well, in men, it's like, don't touch my lady. Right. So as he's getting to know you, and as the dopamine is being set off in his brain that's triggering these reward centers, as he's getting to know you, he's also developing this protective sense about you. He's starting to feel that this is my woman. And I don't mean that in a controlling or possessive sense, but just in a sense of like, this is my relationship. This is my partner. This is like, this is mine. I don't want other people to touch it. I don't want anybody to take it from me. Right. So he's starting to develop this protective sense. So just to reiterate what I'm saying, while he's not releasing oxytocin and bonding with you in the same way you might be bonding with him, which oxytocin feels like I'm in love with this person. I just want to be so close to them. I just can't get enough of them. Right. He might not be bonding with you in that way, the same way that women often bond with men. But the way he is bonding with you is through the rewards of dopamine and then through the protective sense that's being built around you. When you sleep with a man very early on, it kills the dopamine and the vasopressin. So basically, as soon as he completes, the dopamine and the vasopressin drop. And this is what causes the Coolidge effect that I was talking about earlier, right? The Coolidge effect is this sense of they lose interest in the person that they're regularly having sex with. If the levels of dopamine and vasopressin have been allowed to build up sufficiently for long enough, the drop that is experienced after you sleep with them will not be that significant, and it'll build back up. But if it happens very early on and there's been relatively, a little dopamine, just enough to pursue you and want to see you and want to sleep with you, right? And there's been relatively little or no vasopressin in terms of like starting to identify as your partner or having a protective or possessive sense around you, right? Like if none of that has developed, then once once you sleep with them, they're really kind of on to the next. And again, I'm not saying that this is true for all men. I'm not saying that this is true in every situation. I'm not saying that this is 100% true across the board. I think these hormonal levels are different in everybody. But if we were taking a very strong male example that was very testosterone dominant, this is the way it would happen. Now, I think there are a lot of men who naturally release more oxytocin, right? There are a lot of men that are not so high in testosterone. They maybe have a more moderate level of testosterone, and they tend to release a lot of oxytocin, which means they tend to fall in love more easily. They tend to be more romantic. Uh, Ironically enough, men like that are often men that women don't fall in love with so easily. So, of course, as I said in the beginning, there's gray area around all of this. But if you can understand these principles and you can really understand kind of the general sense of what's happening here, you can get a sense of how this develops. And I said earlier that when, single men or dating men have very high levels of testosterone, and when a woman starts dating a man, there's a lot of sexual energy being brought towards you. And I think, very skilled women know how to manipulate this energy. That's what seduction is. And I know those terms like manipulate or seduction, they get a bad rap. And so when I talk about being manipulative or seducing, I don't mean to like be manipulative in the way we often think about it, right? The word manipulate comes from the Latin word mana, which is to work with your hands, right? And so to manipulate is to like move something or change something with your hands. And we could say that when the energy is coming at you, like you can move that energy or direct that energy in a way that's beneficial for both of you, right? There's a way that is that you can manipulate without being manipulative to hurt somebody, but rather a way that's going to actually serve them and serve you as well. And I think great women really know how to do this. They know how to seduce men. And again, you can seduce someone into your bed for the night, but that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about seducing someone into sharing a life with you. And when I say that, what I'm really saying is carrying your own energy in a way that, how do I want to say this? It's like you manage your own energy in a way that requires him to manage his energy. And in that interaction, you develop the kind of relationship you really want to have. I know that's very vague, so let me be a little more clear about what I'm saying. When a man is coming at you, let's say he has high levels of testosterone, let's say he has a lot of sexual energy and he's bringing that to you, right? And women often say, well, why do I have to be the one to stop it? Why can't he be the one to stop it? And I think, well, as men become more aware and more conscious, and like I know men that have taken vows of celibacy for years and chosen to work on their own sexual energy rather than putting it out in the world, like, so there are men who do that. And I think the more conscious men become and the more conscious people become overall, the more and more we're going to see men choosing to do things like that. But generally in a situation where like, two relatively normal people are dating, you know, the woman says, why can't the man be the one to put the brakes on it? Like, honestly, he probably literally can't. Like, he's probably crawling out of his skin at the first opportunity to get some. So really, a lot of times the woman's the only one who can put the brakes on it. Now, of course, like I said, men can develop that, but most men have not developed that. When you require a man to put the brakes on it, and like I think there's even a sexy way to do that, by the way. And I know I just want to say this because if we're talking about seduction, right? You want to invite him into the relationship, not turn him off. I've seen a lot of women get really off put when a man shows sexual interest in them. And I've talked about this before. And, I think the way you handle that even can be the difference between if he wants to see you again or not. Because I think a lot of men, while they are horny, while they do want to have sex, I think they also genuinely value relationship. And I think they also genuinely, while maybe their first priority is like, I just want to get laid, and that's, probably top of the list for a lot of men out there. I think underneath that, they also think to themselves that, if I meet someone and it goes well and I like the person, I would definitely be open to a relationship. And I truly believe a lot of men feel that way. And I think if a man is coming at you with a sexual interest and he feels rejected or shamed, or he feels somehow disregarded in that sense, like you don't recognize that need, or you don't appreciate that, or you're either afraid of that, or you diminish that, or disrespect that in some way, I think that can give a man a feeling like, I don't want anything to do with this person. But if you can honor that and even appreciate that energy he's bringing your way, and in a sexy and flirty way, redirect it and say something like, I love that you're into me like this, and I'm not ready to go there with you yet. But if you play your cards right, maybe I will be. And I'm not saying to use those exact words. That's just kind of the gist of it, right? But there's, in what I just said, there's an appreciation of the energy he's bringing your way. There's also a clarity about what your boundary is, about where you stand, right? So you're honoring him and acknowledging him while asserting your boundary and where you stand. Then there's also the possibility, the leading him to see that there is the possibility of something more, right? If you play your cards right, I might be ready to go there with you. So this is all very, very exciting. This is all very, very sexy. This is all keeping him on the edge of his seat, going like, yeah, like what do I got to do? Right. So I think this is the space that a man needs to live in for a period of time to fall in love with someone. Right? Like, think about if you, and I know, like, as a woman, it might be really hard. Like, as a man, I can feel this experience instantly. I know exactly what I'm talking about. As a woman, it might be difficult to really understand what I'm getting at here. But it's like, imagine like physically wanting something or someone to the level of need, and having it right in front of you, like so close you can like almost taste it. But then it's being withheld a little bit. And there's this element of like working for it and earning it. And every step that he's working for it, the reward that he's working towards is becoming more and more and more and more valuable in his mind. Now, I know what I'm describing here might sound like super toxic and super manipulative, and it can be that way. And there are a lot of women who do it that way, right? Like, I mean, that's not a mystery, right? Like, we've seen women doing this since the beginning of time. So there are a lot of women who do it in a manipulative way, and it is very manipulative. It is very fucked up and toxic. There are also women who do it in an authentic way, where it's not about holding power over the man. I'm I'm not putting the brakes on it and making you jump through all these hoops to sit back and watch and laugh at you and hold this power over you. No, I'm doing it out of self-respect, right? I'm doing it to honor my own boundary. The fact that me honoring my own boundary makes you more attracted to me is just a happy side effect, right? So I'm doing this to pace the relationship at a rate that's comfortable for me. I'm doing this to protect myself, to make sure that, I don't sleep with you and then never hear from you again, right? I'm doing this out of self-respect, out of honoring myself. The fact that it makes me infinitely more attractive to you and more desirable to you and more interesting to you is just a happy side effect. So as he's in this space of, the testosterone is there, it's driving him towards you, but he's not able to fulfill it. He's not able to complete it. What's also happening is the dopamine is being released. So he's being rewarded for all these interactions that you have together. And as I said earlier, the vasopressin is being released, right? And it's actually, the more hits of dopamine he gets around you, the more rewarded he is for your interactions together, the more protective he starts to feel about you, right? The more he starts to feel like, this is my reward, this is my prize, I don't want to let anyone else get to it. I don't want to let it get away from me. I don't want to lose it, right? So this all is working hand in hand together. So then at the time when you do sleep together, whenever that is, and I think I'm not going to say like there's a right time for that to happen, because I don't think there's a right time. I think in relationships, it's very unique to the individuals. And I think it has a lot to do with the depth of relationship that you've created with each other. I think it has a lot to do with the consistency you've built, with how you've shown up for each other. It has a lot to do with a lot of different things, right? So I can't say there's one right time. Like I often say that my wife did this very well with me, right? Like everything I've been talking about, like I had never experienced this with a woman until I met my wife. And what I'm explaining to you right now is very much exactly what happened with me and my wife. So I can't say there's an exact right time to sleep with someone, but what I can say is that if you are present to your interactions in the relationship, and if you're engaged with the person and you're feeling it out, like, and if you trust yourself and you trust your intuition, like you'll know when you're ready to go there with the person. And I think that's just really got to be the metric, right? Like you trust yourself on when you feel safe enough with that person to go there. And, I'll share this, like for myself and my wife, it wasn't an incredibly long time. It was about 3 weeks or something like that. But we also talked on the phone like every single day for hours, right? So there was a lot that was built up in our relationship in a matter of a few weeks. And if there hadn't been so much, then maybe it wouldn't have happened in a few weeks. Maybe it would have happened in a few months. But as he's in this space of continuing to pursue you and continuing to get to know you, and the dopamine and the vasopressin, as we've been talking about, are building up inside of him, something that's also happening is he's regulating his testosterone levels, right? So I said earlier that men in long-term committed relationships or married men have lower testosterone, right? It's not that they don't have testosterone, but the level of testosterone that keeps them out in the world constantly seeking another conquest has lowered. So that doesn't exist for them anymore. What is happening for him in this period of time as he's dating you and getting to know you and, developing a relationship with you, he's actually regulating his testosterone levels, right? Like he's bringing them down a notch. And so when you do take that step with him at the time, again, that you feel is right for you, the testosterone is likely not operating at a level that's going to have him see you as another conquest, right? The testosterone may at that point be lowered to a degree where greater levels of oxytocin can be released, where he can form those strong bonds with you the same way that you form with him. So I say all of this to say, and I want to kind of bring it back here because I've talked a lot about like the details and the kind of the nitty gritty and the science behind all of it. And I for me personally, like I think it's fascinating to be able to see these experiences that I've observed in myself and in my relationship, and that I've observed in different clients and different people I've worked with throughout the years. Like I think it's fascinating to be able to see this stuff and be able to like name it and like be able to recognize what's happening and to be able to understand like scientifically what's happening when we're dating someone. And I think it's also powerful to know that. But I think the most the most important point of today's conversation, and I don't want to get so caught up in all the nitty-gritty details of all the science and the hormones and everything, because I think what we really want to understand here is that men and women bond differently, right? They just do. Like men and women bond differently. And men, for reasons we talked about earlier, evolutionarily speaking, like women tend to bond more quickly. Men tend to bond more slowly. Now, of course, there are men who bond more the way most women do. There are women who bond more the way most men do. So I'm not saying that there aren't, varying degrees here. But generally speaking, when a woman meets a man, if she's attracted to him, if she wants a long-term relationship, if she wants a family, if that's what's happening for her, if he seems like a good match for her, if he seems like the kind of guy she wants to be with, and she doesn't hold herself back to any degree. Like if she just lets it happen, she's probably going to bond with him very quickly. And what happens when a woman bonds with a man very quickly is he just hasn't, for all the reasons we've talked about so far today, he just hasn't had enough time to feel the way about her that she feels about him. There just simply has not been enough time for the same chemicals to emerge in him that have emerged in her. And so she starts to feel insecure. She starts to feel frustrated. She starts to get pushy. She starts to get, these different kinds of things because she's looking at him going like, I feel so much for you. I want so much from you. You don't feel the same as me, or you're not feeling the same way I do. And that's scary, right? That makes me insecure. That makes me uncomfortable. And so most of the frustrations that I hear specifically from women are around these kinds of scenarios. Now, of course, I know as I've said, I coach women who have like very strong avoidant attachment styles, and they're the exact opposite, right? Like they struggle to bond with a man. But generally, when I hear concerns from women, the concerns that I often hear from women are that they have bonded with men quicker than the men have bonded with them. And now they're feeling insecure, they're feeling afraid, they're feeling frustrated, they're feeling all the stuff. Men, on the other hand, when I talk to men, men have a similar but somewhat opposite frustration where they're going like, man, I met this awesome girl or woman. Like I was feeling great about it. Like everything was good. It was all going well. And then she started getting pushy, like out of nowhere. Like I thought things were good. I thought we were vibing. We were getting to know each other. I thought this might go somewhere. And then she starts getting pushy and she starts getting demanding and she starts wanting more than I can give. And she starts asking, these questions and things. And like it's the same frustration on both sides, just opposite versions of it. And I think one of the reasons that, I mean, really probably the biggest reason that we have this frustration is because we don't really understand the processes of how men attach and how women attach, right? Like that's one of the biggest things that's happening here. I think the other thing that's happening is once we do understand, there's not a compassionate relationship to what's happening for the other person. And I think that's what we need to develop. And I want to say, like, for the ladies who are listening today, or for the men who are listening today, like, you're going to have to plug yourself into your own experience. Like, I'll just share for myself. If I reflect back on my own experience dating, and like, I think I've often been a man who, like, I can definitely recognize at certain times in my past, I've had very high levels of testosterone. I can recall after certain sexual experiences, just having the feeling like, I just got to get out of here. Like, I just cannot, like, I just can't stand to be here. Right. Like, there was just something in me that, like, once the sexual experience was done, I just had to get away. But then I've also seen at other times in my life that I've been somebody who was maybe able to release more oxytocin and bond more quickly. Right. Like, I think in some of my adult relationships later in life, like I think about my last few relationships prior to meeting my wife, like, I was more emotionally available. I think I did bond a little more quickly. I don't think I was so sexually driven as I was when I was younger. So I think for all the listeners, whether you're a woman or whether you're a man, you're going to have to kind of plug yourself in and find out, well, okay, what's your personal experience of the situation? But that being said, I think overall, we can develop a more compassionate perspective where, if you are somebody, be it a man or a woman, who tends to bond very quickly, you can compassionately understand that other people don't necessarily, right? Like, you can just kind of compassionately understand that other people have a different process around that. And so what you would want to do is you would want to really learn about yourself, right? And you would want to go like, okay, so I notice for myself that, like, when I'm attracted to someone, when I like someone, when all those, green flags are there, like, or maybe not real green flags, right? But all the things I think are green flags, when all those are there, like, I bond with someone quickly. And what I've realized throughout my life is that often the people that I'm attracted to don't bond as quickly. So what I would want to do is I would want to learn and understand, what is their process of bonding? Like, for people who are different than me, what is the process through which they bond to other people? Right. And I'm just going to take the gender conversation off the table at this point. Yes, generally speaking, men have a certain process and women have a certain process. But if we just talk about the individual, you want to recognize that, I have a certain process and other people have their own process. And I want to know what my process is. And I want to know what the process is of people who are different than me. And I want to be able to navigate a relationship with someone who has a different process than me, because otherwise I'm just going to get beat up in the scenario, right? Otherwise, I'm just going to get walked all over. Like, if I consistently allow myself to quickly bond with people without giving them the time to reciprocate those feelings or figure out how they feel, right? If I do that, then I'm just going to get walked all over. I'm just going to get beat up. So I want to start to develop more awareness about myself, and also awareness about how other people operate around this stuff too. And I'd say the same thing too, like, for the typical male perspective, or even if you're a woman who feels this way, if you're not somebody who bonds to people very quickly, I think it's important to have a compassionate understanding that a lot of people do. And of course, like, if someone starts beating down your door 2 weeks into a relationship, or if they're showing inappropriate behavior for the stage that you are in the relationship, then that person probably isn't mature enough to really have a healthy relationship, and it's okay to let that person go. But I think, within reasonable standards, there's a degree to which we want to recognize that, like, if you have more of an avoidant personality, people are going to probably bond with you more quickly than you bond with them. And in the same way, we would ask them to have a compassionate perspective and give you some space and time to grow into that relationship. Well, you would want to also have a compassionate perspective for the fact that they're going to have to struggle to give you some space and time, and you would want to actually work on being able to bond more more readily. And I think in this way, we can all kind of meet each other in the middle, right? There's a way that we can meet each other in the middle. I think that largely largely the issue is judgment and lack of awareness. Like I think when it comes to what is what is the challenge? Like why do we struggle so much to get into healthy relationships with each other? I think it comes down to being judgmental, and it comes down to a lack of awareness. One, like if you're just not aware of the things I've been talking about today, like I don't know if this is the listenership that does this. I don't necessarily think it is, but I hear I hear from like different women a lot of times who, will go out with man after man after man after man and sleep with these men like very quickly, and then feel constantly defeated that these men aren't falling in love with them. And I'm going, well, like just scientifically speaking, with everything we've talked about today, and also just based on your history and your track record, like at some point you would want to start to say, okay, well, maybe there's something I'm missing here. Like maybe there's something I'm doing that's not working for me. And if you have the awareness about it, that's the first step, to just understand that, okay, people aren't attaching to me the same way I'm attaching to them. And that's not wrong, right? Like these people aren't bad because they don't attach to me the same way I attach to them. They're just different. And then the judgment of like, oh, well, they're just assholes, or oh, they're just jerks, or like that's so harsh and so judgmental. You're disconnected from the fact that there's a human being over there having an experience that, for better or worse, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's a valid experience. And it may not be a match for you, but you can understand the experience, right? And I think the same thing goes like if somebody is in a relationship, if you're more of an avoidant person and someone starts attaching to you very quickly, there's a there's a tendency to be critical of that person. Like, what the fuck's wrong with this person? Why are they so needy? Why are they so like, And so again, we need to be aware enough to understand that, okay, this person attaches differently than I do. This person feels different things than I do in relationships, right? But then there's also got to be some compassion for the fact that, hey, like it's not wrong for that person to attach in the way they're attaching, right? And like I can have some compassion for the fact that, okay, they're attaching quicker than me. Let me just give them some love and some compassion. And of course, if their behavior gets off, right? If they start acting crazy, if they start being overly pushy or overly demanding, or being toxic in some kind of way, well, then I could say, okay, maybe they're not ready for a relationship. But just the fact that they're feeling these things, right? If we could be mature enough. And by the way, I say if we could, like in the Inspired Love program, I see my clients doing this all the time. Like I really do. This is a regular occurrence where people will sit down and have conversations and say things like, I'm not as attracted to you as I would like to be, but I would like to give it time to develop. I would like to see if that could develop for us. Right. And like two mature adults sitting down and having an honest conversation about how they feel and about what they want. And it's like, listen, I don't feel like I'm in love with you right now, but I recognize that you're an amazing person. I recognize that if I were to end up with someone like you, I would be like so lucky to end up with someone like you in my life. And I would like to fall in love with you. And I know that your feelings are stronger than mine right now, but if we can just find a way to meet in the middle, and we can give this relationship some time to flourish without pressure or being demanding or trying to control the situation, and we can just be honest and vulnerable with each other every step of the way, right? And like this is scary, right? Because if you're attaching to someone, you're like, I don't want to do that. I want to lock it down now. I want to know if they're in or out right now. Well, that's like childhood wounding, right? Like that's like your basically what you're saying when you say that is, I want this person to be the adult for me and make things safe for me. I just want them to be my source of security. I don't want to have to develop internal security as I navigate this situation. So, like, that doesn't really work, right? It's it's in us both willing to be those very mature adults and own our own personal experience and understand the other person's experience and meet in the truth and the honesty and the reality of what our relationship is in this moment and be honest with each other about what we want and where it could go from here and take the risks involved in that. There are no guarantees. And I think like we so deeply want to meet someone and have a guarantee from them. Like, even if they gave you every guarantee in the world, they could get hit by a bus tomorrow. And so, like, you got to understand there really is no guarantee. Any guarantee you think you have is an illusion. And this love game that we're playing here, I don't know if calling it a game is the best thing, but this love thing that we're involved in here is deeply, deeply vulnerable. And there's no way around that. And so, yes, we want to have awareness about how people attach and how this all works. We want to have compassion and understanding for the people who relate differently than we do. And we also want to have courage, the courage to face all the experiences on the journey, right? The courage to go to those uncomfortable places, to grow through those uncomfortable things. And so that's, aside from everything we talked about, like I said, I know it's all very fascinating, the science and oh wow, I can describe scientifically what I've been experiencing throughout my life. Like, it's very cool. It's very great to understand. And I think it's very helpful to understand because, if we can understand that this is like stuff that we're dealing with, we can also be less judgmental about it. But at the end of the day, I really want us to get that, like, we all have different relational experiences. We all bond differently. And owning your power in that, rather than operating at the mercy of that, is really what you want to do, right? You want to understand what's happening and take power over it, rather than always feeling like you're at the mercy of these things. I want to answer a question from Katya here. And Katya, great to see you here. Thanks so much for being on with me. I'm going to take this question. It says, does this bonding dynamic play out after early dates? Having trouble deciding if I should ask him what was going on for him after our date. Goodbye was awkward, or accept the fact that his interest has gone down. Okay. Does this bonding dynamic play out after early dates? Having trouble deciding if I should ask him what was going on for him after our date. The goodbye was awkward, or accept the fact that his interest has gone down. Okay. Let me think about this. When if you could, Katya, just let me know when you say this bonding dynamic, what do you mean by this bonding dynamic? I'm not sure exactly what I was talking about when you said that. But just to kind of generally answer the question, I'll say this is that in the early dates, in the very early days of getting to know each other, you can expect that his testosterone is going to be high. Now, again, we're making generalizations for lots of men here, right? This may vary man to man. But in the early dates, you can expect that his testosterone levels are going to be very high, which means that the bonding hormone oxytocin is going to be blocked. I'm just going to read the follow-up here. You say, pursuit being motivating leading up to the date, and after the date, pursuit has been satisfied. Got it. Okay, yeah. So in the early dates, you can expect that his testosterone, you can expect that his testosterone is going to be very high, and that's going to block the bonding hormone oxytocin. What you need in that early period, in order for him to form a strong bond, what you need is some time for that high level of testosterone to be tempered a little bit, which is going to happen while he's waiting, right? So when he wants to move that energy forward, but it's being held up, right? That's tempering his testosterone. He's kind of being forced to bring it down a notch. Alongside of that, what's developing is the dopamine, right? The rush, the reward, the motivation to continue seeing you and getting to know you, alongside of the vasopressin, feeling protective over you, right? So what needs to develop in him is enough time for the dopamine to build up inside of him, the vasopressin to build up inside of him, for him to form that strong protective sense around you, that sense that you're his woman, right? And for the testosterone to lower to some degree. And as the testosterone lowers, that's going to allow those other hormones to become more dominant. It's also going to allow more oxytocin to develop. So I say all that to say that, yes, in the early days, it's more likely that testosterone is going to be driving the bus. And testosterone is the thing that's going to make him want to sleep with someone and move on to the next, and sleep with someone and move on to the next, right? That's the high sex drive hormone that just makes him want to, spread his seed. So to whatever degree you give him time to temper the testosterone, to bring it down, while at the same time allowing some of those other hormones to become more dominant in him, it's going to become more likely that he bonds with you in a long-term way. Now, I can't say, like I said earlier, I can't say exactly what that timeline is. It's different for every person. Some men, you'll sleep with them on the first date and they'll still fall in love. I'm not saying that happens for every man. I'm saying that is what high levels of testosterone causes. And so when a man has very high levels of testosterone, that means he has a very high sex drive. And when that high sex drive is satisfied very quickly, the testosterone tends to drive him on to the next. Whereas when you temper the testosterone and allow other hormones to become dominant in him, it leads more towards long-term bonding. Again, that varies person to person. I can't give a rule for every single person, but that is the general way of how it works. So hope that answers your question. Lots of love. Thanks for being here. It's always great to see you. And I hope that supports you. All right. So I think with that, if anybody has another question, you could drop it in the chat. I'm happy to take one or two more questions. If there aren't any other questions, I think I'm just going to close it out. I see we had a couple people just recently jump on with us on YouTube. Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for being on. I have my love here with us on Podbean. Always great to see you on here, love. And Katya, thanks for being on with us on Podbean. For those of you joining on YouTube, if you ever want to call into the show, the instructions are below, right in the description. So you can download the Podbean app and you can actually call into the show. So that's always, it's always cool to have people calling into the show, or you can just stream on YouTube. It's fine there as well. I'm just going to give it a moment if any other questions come in. And if not, I think I'll go ahead and close it out. For those of you who are just joining in today, we did a pretty cool discussion on the differences between how men and women bond to each other in terms of, hormones and things like that. So it's been a great discussion. The podcast will be released here in a couple of weeks. Make sure to check it out on the Conscious Love Show when it comes out. I'm not seeing any questions come in, so I may just go ahead and close it out. But hey, Yasmin Reyes, hello. Thanks for being on. By the way, for those of you on YouTube, I can't really find out who you are or anything unless you drop a comment in the chat. But if you do want to drop a comment and say hi, then I can find out who you are. Oh, wait, does this tell me? No, it only shows me who chats. So if anyone wants to say hi to me, I'd love to say hi back. I'll just give it another moment. If not, we're going to go ahead and close it out here. But I will take any questions that come in before I close it, if there are any. All right. I'm not seeing anybody, but to my love and Katya joining in on Podbean, thanks for being here, and lots of love to you. And to those of you with me on YouTube, thank you for being here. Definitely, if you just tuned in towards the end, make sure to check out the episode that's going to be released in a couple weeks. It's going to be a good one. All right. Lots of love, everybody. Thanks for being on with me. Big love and blessings. And I'll see y'all back here next week. Okay. Take care. Bye, everybody.